start maybe 8 to 2 or 8 or 3 just to get the kids out of the halaqah, so they always have like a few minutes transition. So today, inshallah ta'ala, we continue. This is the second session of the Aqeedah of the Fiqh Hanbali course, sorry. And I calculated it'll be around 13 sessions, which will take us right to the end of July. In order for us to finish the ibadat piece, meaning we go through tahara, which is what we're doing right now, and then we'll go through salah, zakah, siyam, and hajj. To get to the end of that, it'll require 13 sessions, wallahu alam, in total. I can't really squeeze it in anything less than that. So we'll take us towards the end of July. I usually try to not ruin people's July, but I'll just ruin your July and give you your August, inshallah ta'ala, to enjoy the summer. So we'll have 13 sessions, which is why we started early. We started last week. Usually we start these, the semester usually starts mid the month, like usually we would start today or next week in May, but I started early in May just because I wanted to get people done by July so you can have August off and you don't have to worry about things. The Fiqh Hanbali is the metin that we're studying, Zad al-Mustaqni', and I hope you took some time and looked at some of the material that I shared with you online, just to get to know the name of the book, the name of the Imam who wrote the book, Imam Hajjawi, get to know a few things about it, just get familiar with the actual text and what it's about, and what it is explaining, meaning it is an explanation of something called Al-Muqni', which was written by Ibn Qudam. It's a very, very small text. It's too small for me to actually even teach you, and it's too complicated. So this text is a little bit more juicy, so we can talk about that, and knowing kind of when he lived and when he did this. So last week we stopped here. We'll continue inshallah from where we left off. I think there's some of it that was. Is this where it was left off? Do you know where the audio stopped? If you give me where the audio stopped, I can at least start from where the audio stopped. Oh. Sorry? Say it again? Who's here? So this is where I just continue from here. Okay, very good. All right. So we'll go over. So وإن بلغ قلتين وهو الكثير، يقول المصنف رحمه الله الإمام الحجاوي، وإن بلغ قلتين وهو الكثير وهما 500 رطل عراقي تقريبا، فخلطته نجاسة غير بول آدمي أو عذرته المائعة فلم تغيره، أو خلطه البول أو العذرة ويشق نسحه كمصانع طريق مكة فطهور. So Imam al-Hajjawi talks about what is purifying water, what is pure in itself, in its essence, and is able to purify something else. Whether it's to remove ritual impurity, which means if you don't have wudu and you want to have wudu, versus remove physical impurity, which is najasa on your, and you want to get rid of it. The water you use has to be tahur. You can't use another substance. You can't use honey, for example, or you can't use like Gatorade. Or you have to use water that is tahur, that it can purify. In order for the najasa to actually be removed, you have to use it. So he has to define for us what is purifying water. And purifying water is water that is in its natural state. If it's changed and it's less than 162 liters, then it's no longer purifying. If it's changed by something that is pure, like if it's changed by perfume or changed by something that is not impure in nature, then the water is pure, but it's not purifying. If something that is impure falls into it and it's less than 162 liters, then now it's najis. Now it's no longer pure. And if the water is on your body, now you need purifying water to get rid of it because it's najis in nature. The moment water is over 162 liters, right? Water water that is more than 162 liters, it is purifying. It is pure and is purifying as long as it's not changed, as long as we don't see any changes to its essence, like it's not different in terms of its scent, its color, or its taste, meaning its structure, its substance is the same. So if a little bit of urine falls into 162 liters, but the water is not yellow and it does not smell like urine, then this water is purifying. Even though we saw with our own eyes something that is impure fall right into it. But because it's qullatayn, it's 162 liters or more, then it does not lose its purity. And this is something that all four madhahib agree upon because the Prophet ﷺ said it multiple times and he practiced it multiple times. So it's something that's almost fully agreed upon within our sharia. Here, the Imam, if water reaches 2 qullas, right, 262, approximately 162 liters, which is a large quantity, anything else is a small quantity, and is then mixed with an impure substance that is not urine or other liquid waste from humans. And I pointed out that this is where Imam Hajjawi goes against the prominent position of the madhab al-Hanbali. He goes against the prominent position, where he says that as long as the impure substance is not human urine or human waste, he exempted human waste, as if to say, if human waste is going to fall into it, then it's not pure anymore. And that's not the position of the Hanbali madhab. And I pointed this out for you here. This is the Hanafi position. Only the Hanafis see that. Meaning the Hanafis, they see specifically human waste to have a different effect on pure water. But the rest of the madhab, the Hanbali, the Shafi'i, the Maliki, they don't. So it doesn't matter what type of urine fell into the 162 liters, it's always going to be purifying for all three madhab. The Hanafis specify, if the urine was human or human waste, then it is impure. They specify specifically a human waste, and they have their evidence to support that. And again, the first level of any madhab is not for me to argue with you the reasoning behind every ruling. No, my goal is just to give you the ruling so you understand it. The second level is to explain to you the evidence, and the third level is explain to you the reasoning behind how they extracted the ruling from the evidence. So it's 3 levels of studying fiqh, and then the fourth level is where you take an original text that is maybe a couple of volumes, 6, 7 volumes, and you study all the details of the fiqh of that madhab, and that is when you're a scholar that is able to actually issue fatwa within that madhab. And inshallah you become that, and if you don't, it's fine. Learning a basic level of fiqh is good. Yes? You ever seen a big barmil? What's a barmil? Like a garbage bin, yeah, that's around 100. That's around 200 liters. Yeah, so that's around that. I don't know how much in a bathtub would go. Do you know? I don't know how many liters would go into a bathtub, honestly. I'm not very good with that either, but I know that a garbage bin, like a large, will around 200 liters of water, because we used to use this in Syria. They're the same sizes that they are today, and they take around 200 liters. And we used to use that as in Syria we didn't go 162. We weren't that precise. We just went 200. We said 200 liters and more, just to be safe, because when you say they use different measurements for these things. So they would go by something called 500 رطل عراقي. Ratl is a measurement, and Iraqi it's an Iraqi measurement. It's 500 Ratl Iraqi, whatever that means. I don't know. I didn't live back then. I don't know what they. So the translation is 160 liters. Our shuyukh would say 200. Just to be safe, they would just stick to 200 liters. But honestly, you're welcome to use this number, because it's verified by other scholars, and I think it's reasonable too. So around like a barmil is what we're looking at. So an impure substance is mixed with impure substance without changing it, or urine or waste that is difficult to remove, is purifying. So here he just pointed out that because he's saying that if it's human waste, it's a problem for him. He's going against the madhab, his actual madhab, and every single text you'll study, the scholar who's writing the text will deviate from the prominent position of his madhab or his school sometimes. And it's our job to kind of point out where they did, just so that you know. That's why Abu Shuja' is so lovely in Fiqh Shafi'i, because he doesn't deviate from the madhab at all. The whole text, he does not make one deviation from the prominent position of the madhab, which makes it so easy to teach this text. He deviates like 25 times, so I have to point out the 25 times where he deviates. But if you don't accept that, then really the only time 160 liters or more of water is impure or not purifying anymore is when it changes. And then it's no longer purifying. ولا يرفع حدث رجل طهور يسير خلت به امرأة لطهارة كاملة عن حدث. If a lone woman uses a small quantity of water to make a complete purification from a state of ritual impurity, that used water will not lift a male's ritual impurity, and it is not purifying. If it's a small amount of water and she used it for a full ritual, to remove the major ritual impurity like nifas or hayd, then a man should not be using it afterwards to lift his ritual impurity. All right. وإن تغير طعمه أو لونه أو ريحه بطبخ أو ساقط فيه أو رفع بقليله حدث أو غمس فيه يد قائم من نوم ليل ناقض لوضوء أو كان آخر غسلة زالت النجاسة بها فطاهر. So here he points out a few issues. So water that is pure but not purifying is the second category of water. So again, you have tahur, something that is tahir mutahhir, and then you have tahir, something that is just pure. It does not remove hadath, meaning you can't remove a ritual impurity or remove filth off your body physically, but it's pure water. If you use it, you can use it for food, you can use it to drink, you can use it to other stuff, but you can't use it for wudu specifically or ghusl. So what is that? That is, the second category is if its color, taste, or smell changes as a result of cooking or something falling into it. Is it not? Okay, so should I repeat this again? Okay, so when we talk about change, 160 liters of water that changes in terms of its texture or color or scent, it can be changed by something that is pure. It can be changed by something that is impure, right? If it's changed by something that is pure, it's no longer purifying, but the water itself is pure. So if you pour a gallon of perfume into the water, and now the water tastes different and it smells different, so this water that you have now, even if it's 160 liters or more, even if it's more than that, is pure, but it's not purifying. You can't use it for wudu. That's why when you go Masjid al-Umawi, they actually have two, there's what did they call it? They put a certain type of, and it smells really nice, and it's nice to drink, and they use it for, but you can't use it for wudu. And there's like a sign that you don't use it for wudu because it's water, it's a lot of water, but it's changed. They use the substance to change it, so it's no longer purifying, all right? Where are we here? Or if a small quantity of that water is used to lift ritual impurity. So if you have less than 162, and it's used, someone used it to make wudu, and that wudu was needed, meaning they didn't have wudu before. It's not that they were just doing a second wudu. No, they didn't have wudu before. Then that water cannot be used for wudu anymore. So if you have, like, say, you have a small, a basin of water, so it's less, and someone used it to make wudu, and they needed it, then you can't use that to make wudu anymore. But the water is not najis. It's not impure. It's pure. It's just not going to be purifying anymore. Or if someone's hand is dipped in it after they arise from nocturnal sleep, which invalidated their ablution. So if someone, for some reason, woke up from sleep and put their hand into a basin of water, right? And they didn't wash their hands first. They didn't scoop or use something to wash their hands first. Then that water now is no longer purifying, it's pure. And they have their evidence to support this. And this is not something that all of the madhab agree upon. This is a specific to the Hanbali madhab in general. Or if it was the last water used in removing impurities, it is pure but not purifying. So if it was used to wash off an impurity, it was used to wash it off, and it's less than 162, then this water is no longer seen as purifying, it's seen as just pure. So if people were scooping and washing and scooping and washing, then this water it doesn't seem as najasa, unless you saw najasa fall into it, but it's no longer going to be purifying. All right? And this is also specific to the Hanbali madhab. Where are we here? Right. والنجس ما تغير بنجاسة أو لاقاها وهو يسير أو انفصل عن محل نجاسة قبل زوالها فإن أضيف إلى الماء النجس طهور كثير غير تراب ونحوه أو زال تغير النجس الكثير بنفسه أو نزح منه فبقي بعده كثير غير متغير طهور. So impure is the third category of water. It is water that has been altered by impurities, or is a small quantity of water that has encountered an impurity or has separated from a spot containing an impurity before removing that impurity. 162 or more that has changed because of impurity, that's najis. A small amount that has a drop of impurity in it, it's najis. Or a small amount that was used to wash off impurity. Before the impurity is gone, the water itself, so let's say you have a slope, you have a najasa, and you use water to wash it off, the water that is falling into the basin afterwards is going to be impure. And that's kind of common sense, so it's nothing specific that you need to kind of think about. But that's what he used here as examples. Impure water becomes purifying if a large quantity of purifying water is added to it, but not if the impure water contains dirt and the like. So how do you make impure water pure? You add to it something that will make it beyond 162 liters. So if you have like 200 liters of water that is pure, and you have a small basin of water that has a drop of impurity, so it's no, it's najis. If you take that and you add it to the 162 or 200, now it's all pure, unless it changes. Unless it changes. Imagine the impurity is so powerful, it changed the basin, and then you put it in these 200 liters and it changed to 200 liters, then now the whole thing is najis. So you have to be careful with that. It's very rare, obviously, for a drop of urine to be that powerful to change 200 liters of water. But theoretically speaking, that would be the problem. But if you add a basin of water which is less than 162, obviously, that is impure because of an impurity falling into it, and you add it to something that's over 162, now the whole thing is pure. So that's one way to do it. Or large quantity of impure water returns to the way it was on its own without anything being added to it. So if you have a large 200 liters or 160 liters and impurity fell into it and something changed about it, but you left it. You left it for a day, you left it for a couple of hours, and then the water went back to being the way it was before. Theoretically speaking, then this water now is tahur. You didn't do anything to it though. It's not like you took chloride and put it into it and then now it looks more like water. No, if you manipulated it, then it doesn't count. If you manipulated it, then it doesn't count. But if it on its own goes back to its normal substance, then that's fine. It is tahur, you can use it. Now, and see, by removing water from it, a large quantity, approximately 160 liters of unchanged water remains. Here he what did he mean here? About lost impure water becomes purified. A large quantity is added to it, a large quantity of pure water. Yes. Now I understand what he was talking about here. The translation is not. He actually does a pretty good job, honestly, for translation because the Arabic language here is not simple. So the third way of making something impure pure. By removing water from it in a large quantity, so a large quantity of which is 162 or more of unchanged water remains, then that obviously anything over 162 that is not changed is going to continue to be tahir, going to be tahur. So anything that is over 162 that is not changed, it continues to be purifying, even if we see something, if you add something to it or remove something from it to add to another group of water, it continues to be purifying or tahur. وإن شك في نجاسة ماء أو غيره أو طهارته بنى على اليقين وإن اشتبه طهور بنجس حرم استعمالهما ولم يتحرى ولا يشترط للتيمم إراقتهما ولا خلطهما وإن اشتبه بطاهر توضأ منهما وضوءا واحدا من هذا غرفة ومن هذا غرفة وصلى صلاة واحدة. So we did this last time, but because the audio didn't go, I'm just repeating them for you. So we'll go through this quickly. This is simple. So you always act according to certainty about impurity or purity of water or anything else. So if you're certain that it's pure but you're doubting it's impure, you go by the certainty, which is the purity. If you're like, I'm sure it's impure, I'm not sure if someone added something to it and made it pure, you go by the certainty, which is the impurity. So just know that that's the case for almost everything in Islam. If purifying water is indiscernible from impure water, then it's unlawful to use one and one does not attempt to discern between the two. You're not supposed to go and try and figure out. If you're uncertain, this is tahir and this is not tahir, then you just leave it. Pouring out the two questionable waters or mixing them together is not a condition for making dry ablution. So technically you could add one to the other if you have the ability. Sometimes you don't. Again, when we talk about two groups of water, most likely if you can't discern them, then they're both less than 162, because if they're more than 160 liters, then it's just based on whether they're changed or not. You'll know which one is not pure because it'll be different. It'll smell different or it'll be different. The other one will be fine. So we're talking about two groups of water here that are small, less than 162. So it's two basins of water, and they're not changed because you don't need that for one to be impure. If a drop of urine is one, then that's enough for it to be impure. But you don't know which one is. You know one of them is najis. You know one of them is najis. So what do you do here? You know one of them is najis. So if you mix them and they go over 162 liters, then you can do that. Like if mixing them goes over the qullatayn, then you can do that, and that's fine. If you can't do that, if you can't mix them because they're not enough, then you don't have to discern, and you don't have to mix them, and you just go do tayammum. You go do dry ablution. We're going to talk about dry ablution in detail within these lessons. But you do tayammum. But you don't touch them. You just leave the two waters, and you don't have to do anything about them at all. If purifying water is indiscernible from pure water, one makes a single ablution from both and prays a single prayer. So the same example, but now we have two basins. One is purifying, and the other one is pure, but it's not purifying. I don't know which one is which. Then I just make two wudu's. Because I'll be fine either way. Why didn't I do that in the first time around? Because the first time around, if I do the wrong one last, then I just made wudu with najasa. So it doesn't work. Right? And well, so why don't I make wudu with the first one and pray, and the second one and pray? Well, because one of your prayers was prayed based on najasa, like after making wudu with najasa. So that's not, so you just do tayammum. You don't do that. All right. وإن اشتبهت ثياب طاهرة بنجسة أو بمحرمة صلى في كل ثوب صلاة بعد النجس أو المحرم وزاد صلاة. So pure garments are indiscernible from impure or unlawful garments. This is very rare. It's never going to happen. But I'm going to explain it to you because these were situations people ran into back in the day when it was hard to come by water and it was hard to come by clean clothes. Like it's a luxury that we had that a lot of people didn't have back then. So sometimes they're not sure. It's undiscernible from impure, unlawful garments. And one knows their number. Then one's prayer is prayed in a different garment until the number of pairs equals the number of impure garments plus one prayer. So if I'm like, I have 10 pieces of clothing, and the 3 of them are najis. 3 of them, I know 3 out of the 10 are najis. I don't know which one. I don't know which of the 3. So I pray in 4 garments, 4 separate prayers. So I know that I'm sure I prayed one in something that was not najis, right? When is this going to happen? I don't know, but this is these are the scenarios that he would run, and he's running them just so you understand what you have to think about when you're in these situations. You're not allowed to pray in something that is haram or something that is najis. And if you can't discern, then you have to figure out a way that you make sure you pray a salah in something that's satir al-awrah and that is not impure. So this is the example that he gave. So we go to آنية. كل إناء طاهر ولو ثمينا يباح اتخاذه واستعماله إلا آنية ذهب وفضة ومضببا بهما فإنه يحرم اتخاذهما واستخاذها واستعمالها ولو على أنثى وتصح الطهارة منها إلا ضب يسيرة من فضة لحاجة وتكره مباشرتها لغير حاجة وتباح آنية الكفار ولو لم تحل ذبائحهم وثيابهم إن جهل حالها. All right, so this is not very complicated actually, and it's helpful. So this is talking about آنية, which is containers. All pure containers, even if expensive, are permissible to acquire and use except for containers made of pure gold or pure silver, and what is soldered by them. So soldering is when is basically what you do. They would solder, if there's a hole in a container, they would solder it with fidda, or with dhahab, with silver or gold. I don't know why, but apparently that it just works better, so they would use that. And it's permissible to use in Islam as long as there's a small amount of soldering. It's not like there's a big hole and then they would use a lot of gold and silver to do it. That would be that is unrecommended in Islam in general. So as long as it's not made of gold or silver and what is soldered by them, for these are unlawful to acquire and use even for a woman. This is the Hanbali position. And then the other madhab have like 3 or 4 other positions in this whole issue. Like meaning, depending on how big the soldering is, there are different permissibilities. And in terms of women owning containers that are pure gold and pure silver, there are other opinions on this issue. But this is the Hanbali position that they take. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't see it to be relevant to the course. I will go into detail on issues that I think are important, for sure. But some of them I'll just you can look them up if you're interested. So purification from them is valid. So if there is a container that's pure gold, purification from it is valid. The problem is you shouldn't own it. You shouldn't own it. But you own it, and there's water in it, and the water is not changed. Is purifying to use. It's just the problem is the ownership. So they differentiate between you shouldn't have this, don't use it. But if you did, it's purified, and the purification is valid from using it. It is lawful to use a small amount of silver solder if needed, but it's offensive to touch the soldered area without need when you're making wudu. The implements of non-Muslims, meaning the containers that belong to non-Muslims, are lawful to use even if their slaughtered meat is unlawful. Meaning there's a group of non-Muslims who you cannot eat their dhabiha. They're not Ahl Kitab and they don't have, or they slaughter for a sanam or something. So even if their dhabiha is haram to eat, you can still use their containers and the water that they have in their containers for wudu and stuff. You can use that, and you can also use their clothing. As long as you don't know it to be impure. Like you don't have to go ask. You don't have to ask, is this najis, is it pure? Is this water pure? Is not? You don't have to ask the question. You can just use the water, use the garments. You don't have to ask the question unless you know that they're impure for some reason. If you don't know that, you can use it even if the people are not Ahl Kitab. Their dhabiha is not halal for us to eat. Okay? ولا يطهر جلد ميتة بدباغ ويباح استعماله بعد الدبغ في يابس من حيوان طاهر في الحياة ولبنها وكل أجزائها نجسة غير شعر ونحوه وما أبين من حي فهو كميتة. Tanning, so tanning is obviously a big deal in all books of fiqh because it was a big deal back then. It's not as much of a big deal today because we don't really go through it, but I think you should understand it because a lot of the clothing and what we own in terms of suitcases and stuff come from tanning is because you're using skin animals, or animal skin, sorry. So tanning does not purify skins of dead animals that were not properly slaughtered. All right, anyone attended the Fiqh Shafi'i? Is that the same ruling? So the issue of tanning of an unslaughtered dead animal has different opinions. The Shafi'is say all unslaughtered dead animals become pure with tanning, except for dogs and pigs. The Hanafis agree, but they don't exempt dogs. They think it's just pigs that don't become pure. So the Shafi'is say anything that is dead, the moment you tan it, becomes pure, except for pigs and dogs. The Hanafis say everything that is dead, that was not slaughtered, and you tan it, becomes pure, except for pigs. All right? The Hanbali say that all unslaughtered dead animals do not become pure with tanning, but allow for use for carrying dry foods, not foods that can absorb anything. So you can't use rotab, you can use balah, for example. That's the example that they use in the books of fiqh. The Malikis allow for the usage of tanned, unslaughtered dead animals, aside from pigs, to carry dry foods and for wearing, but not during prayer. So you can use the clothing, you just can't use it for salah. So if you're wearing, that's the Maliki opinion. So these are the three opinions, or the four opinions basically, that exist for tanning. I'm sharing it with you because it is because we've already done two courses of, this is the third course of fiqh. So if you've attending two of them, this is kind of puts all of the opinions for you. The Hanbalis don't see it to be, the tanning does not purify dead animals, and and that opinion actually made it quite difficult for people within the area they were living. A more modern opinion sees all unslaughtered dead animals becoming pure with tanning, even pigs and dogs. And this modern opinion is not only in the Hanbali madhab, it's also in the other madhab as well. Like a lot of modern scholars have no problem with tanning. Yeah.
Tanning an animal, just leaving it on.
So that's a part of the process, but that's not the whole process. And I honestly don't even know exactly what they do. There's chemicals and there's a certain amount of time and stuff. I really did not spend any. I couldn't care less. Someone people do dibagh or do tanning. Allah barik fihum. This is what you just need to know, like the fiqh. It's actually a big part of of our human race story in terms of our progression is we learn to tan. Tanning skins helped us get dressed and stay warm within our lives. All right, let's go back because I just moved on. So after being tanned, they are lawful to use with dry goods if the animal was pure when alive, whether edible like a sheep or not like a calf. And this is obviously the Hanbali position. I explained to you the other positions on this issue, so you can always go back to them. The milk and all parts of dead animals that were not properly slaughtered are impure, except for hair and the like. Their sha'r, anything that is not skin but on the skin, like hair or wool, that continues to be pure. Anything separated from a living animal is akin to an unslaughtered dead creature of its type in being impure or impure. So anything that is cut off an animal, for example, let's say its leg was chopped off for some reason, then that piece is seen as if it's a piece of it's a carcass, like it is treated as if it's a unslaughtered dead animal. And then all the ahkam, all the rulings that apply to that apply. So you can't, for example, chop off a piece of an animal and then go and barbecue it. Like that's impermissible Islam because it's impure. You're not allowed to do that. I'm just saying, from a fiqh perspective, that's not permissible. And these things matter because people will ask these questions in situations where they want to eat, but they don't want to actually kill the whole animal. So it's not acceptable to do that. You have to slaughter the whole animal. You can't just chop off a leg and they can survive and they can continue to live and give you milk, but now you're eating its piece, so that's not permissible. Yeah, life was not as easy as it is today. I love people's faces when I talk about this stuff. All right, Babul istinja. So going to the lavatory, or going to the bathroom. يستحب عند دخول الخلاء قول بسم الله أعوذ بالله من الخبث والخبائث وعند الخروج منه غفرانك الحمد لله الذي أذهب عني الأذى وعافاني وتقديم رجله اليسرى دخولا ويمنى خروجا عكس مسجد ونعل واعتماده على رجله اليسرى بعده في فضاء واستتاره وارتياده لبوله مكان رخوا ومسحه بيده اليسرى إذا فرغ من بوله من أصل ذكره إلى رأسه ثلاثا ونثره ثلاثا وتحوله من موضعه ليستنجي في غيره إن خاف تلوثا. So let's talk about this. Is not very complicated. It talks about like the etiquette of going to the lavatory. So it's recommended to say when entering the lavatory, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, or Bismillah. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal-khaba'ith. In the name of Allah, oh Allah, verily I seek protection through you from the devils. Al-khubuth wal-khaba'ith, they translate it as male and female devils. There's really, the evidence for that is kind of questionable. I don't know. Al-khubuth and al-khaba'ith is anything that is rotten or harmful in any way. But whether it's male and female devils, I honestly can't really defend that piece very well, very well. Just say, you just say this. And when you leave, when you exit, غفرانك الحمد لله الذي أذهب عني الأذى. Forgive me, oh Allah, forgive me. Praise being to Allah who have removed the harm from me and cured me. So there's etiquette from the Prophet ﷺ in terms of what he said when he entered and when he left the bathroom to relieve himself. It is recommended to enter the lavatory with one's left foot and to exit with one's right, the opposite of what you would do to a masjid, right? It's like you're entering a place where there's impurities, you enter with your left, you leave with your right. You enter to a place that's pure, you enter with your right, you leave with your left. This is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in general. This is the opposite of how one enters and exits a mosque and a house, and of how one wears slippers and leather footgear. You always start with the right. So it is also recommended to favor one's left foot while squatting to relieve oneself, to distance oneself when in vacant areas, to conceal oneself, and to seek soft ground for urination. So these are all etiquettes that we don't really use these days unless you're camping. But when you're camping, you're relieving yourself. You put more emphasis on your left foot when you're doing impurities. You look for places where if you urinate, it's soft, so the urine does not end up coming in, hitting your clothing or hitting yourself. You go in a place where you're mastur, you go on the top of a mountain and take your thing. You have to be in a place where it's concealed and it's hidden, and there's enough space for you to do it. After urinating, it is recommended to wipe the penis from the base, to tip 3 times using the left hand, and to wrap it 3 times, and to move to another spot to remove the impurity of soiling oneself is feared. And this is just the etiquette of what men specifically should do when they're relieving themselves. It's actually quite helpful for young boys to know this. Because they don't realize that within the urethra you end up having a lot of, there is leftover residual urine that stays if you don't take a second and actually make sure you clean it properly. And then that obviously goes into your clothing. And small amounts that are not, that you cannot avoid are forgiven, but large amounts are not. And the Prophet ﷺ pointed this out in a hadith about people being punished في القبر because of عدم استتاره من بوله. I mean, they didn't care whether they had urine on them or they didn't, so they didn't take that time to make sure that they were pure and clean. So it's something worth learning and sharing with young people. Sorry, this is so okay. ويكره دخوله بشيء فيه ذكر الله تعالى إلا لحاجة. ورفع ثوبه قبل دنوه من الأرض وكلامه فيه وبوله في شق ونحوه ومس فرجه بيمينه واستنجاؤه واستجماره بها واستقبال النيرين. So unless needed, it is offensive to enter the lavatory with anything bearing mention of Allah in His name, like the Quran or something that has dhikr in it. So it's offensive as in it's unrecommended. This is the terminology that brother Sheikh Musa Ferber used. I don't know why he chose offensive. He doesn't use it for the rest of his books. I don't know why he specifically used it for this one. It's unrecommended, it's makruh. Now, this is actually, the Hanbalis and Malikis see it to be impermissible. They don't see it to be makruh. They see it to be haram. For you to take anything that has the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like a Quran or something, into the bathroom or into the lavatory. So it's not makruh to them. Imam Hajjawi stated that it was unrecommended, which is the opinion of the Hanafis and the Shafi'is. So he kind of deviated from the Hanbali madhab with this opinion. That is makruh, not haram. For the Hanabila, it's haram. What else? As that is unlawful. To lift one's garment before drawing close to the ground, to speak while urinating, to urinate in services and the like, meaning in a place where you don't know where the urine is going, and it's like it's an opening, and then that urine ends up going to a place where it harms other people, because you don't know where that opening is actually going. You shouldn't urinate into it. This is just human decency, but he's pointing it out here in fiqh, like a burrow or such. To touch one's genitals with the right hand, to use right hand when removing impurity with stone, and to face the sun and the moon. And this is the facing the sun and the moon is across the madhab, by the way. We used to see that you don't face the qibla, and you don't turn your back to the qibla, you don't face the sun or the moon out of respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. Unless you're inside of a bathroom, it doesn't matter. When you're in a bathroom and its walls, it doesn't matter which direction it is. But it's when you're in the open. In the open, you don't do it towards the qibla, you don't turn your back to the qibla, you don't face the sun or turn your back to the sun or the moon. You kind of move a little bit aside out of respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. But in bathrooms, it's in enclosed areas, it's fine. So ويحرم استقبال القبلة واستدبارها في غير بنيان ولبثه فوق حاجته وبوله في طريق وظل نافع وتحت شجرة عليها ثمرة. It's unlawful while relieving oneself to face or turns one back to the direction of the prayer, the qibla, when not inside a building. If one turns away from the qibla or places a barrier between oneself and the qibla, it ceases to be unlawful. So again, like when you're in a bathroom, it's fine. So bathrooms can have in any direction, doesn't matter. You don't have to get too upset with the direction of my bathroom is towards the qibla or not. It's a bathroom. It doesn't matter. It's when you're doing it out in the open that it matters. It is unlawful to remain in the lavatory longer than needed. I never thought this would be important. I honestly didn't. Like I studied these books when I was maybe 16. I thought it was like always ridiculous. Who stays in the bathroom more? Yeah. SubhanAllah, you wait long enough. When you study fiqh, you wait long enough, and everything that you thought made no sense comes back and makes sense again. Wallahi. You live long enough, you just be patient. Like I'm sure you're reading some of this, like, why the heck is he talking about this? Just be patient. Be patient. Yeah, you go 316, you come back and you find, oh my God, that's what he talked about. 180 and it changes. But yeah, it's unlawful to remain in the lavatory longer than needed, to urinate on a trodden path. ويحرم استقبال القبلة واستدبارها في غير مياه وبوله في طريق وظل نافع. So a path that people are using. So trodden path, where people trot, people walk back and forth. You shouldn't be urinating on that. In beneficial shade, where people will sit, or sunny areas during the winter, where people will want to go stand in the sun, or beneath a fruit-bearing tree. So basically, he's just thinking of all the places where people would want to sit. So you can draw the analogies to Canada and say wherever people are going to be, you shouldn't be urinating in that area. Obviously, we shouldn't be urinating in public in general, but this is for in times and places where public bathrooms where you couldn't come by them, and there's still places like that in the world for sure. All right. ويستجمر بحجر ثم يستنجي بالماء ويجزئه الاستجمار إن لم يعد الخارج موضع العادة. So one cleans oneself with a stone and then with water. It is adequate to remove the impurity solely with a stone, so long the impurity does not move beyond its typical location. So as long as, forgive me, you're not smearing things with the stone, then you're fine to use just a stone. And this is also across the madhab, because water was hard to come by sometimes. And it's better to use water, again agreed upon across the madhab, it's always better to use water. And it's okay to only use water. They say you can use only stones if they give conditions for using only stones. It has to be 3 stones, and it has to actually remove it, and you can't be smearing things around as you're kind of trying to clean yourself from a bowel movement. Or if there's no water, that's a whole different story. ويشترط للاستجمار بأحجار ونحو أن يكون طاهرا منقع غير عظم وروث وطعام محترم ومتصل بحيوان ويشترط 3 مسحات منقية فأكثر ولو بحجر ذي شعب. So the preconditions for cleaning oneself with stones and the like, example wood or a patch of cloth, are that the object used for cleaning is pure. Right? It has to be something that is pure. It can't be something that is najis. You can't use something that is impure to cleanse your. Permissible to use, capable of cleaning the area, not a bone, dung, food, or anything possessing sanctity. So you can't use a bone of an animal, or you can't use food for it. For sure. And not a part of an animal like its tail or unshorn wool. So you can't use a living thing, obviously, and you can't use something that came off a living thing either, right? So even if it's their skin, you shouldn't lose it for that. A condition for cleaning oneself solely with stone is that there be at least 3 clean wipes, even if using a stone with 3 corners. So you still have to use 3 separate wipes. If it's not 3 stones, then at least a stone that has 3 corners that you can use each independently. And hopefully that's the end of. ويسن قطعه على وتر, and it's recommended to stop wiping at an odd number. So 3 is what you start with. If you're going to do more than 3, then go 5 and 7 and whatnot. ويجب الاستنجاء لكل خارج إلى الريحة ولا يصح قبله وضوء ولا تيمم. Cleaning oneself with water, it's obligatory whenever anything other than flatulence exists, the waste passages. Anything that comes out, you should be cleaning it with water. And if not, then as the stones as explained, if you have no access to water. Flatulence, you don't need to do that. It's not valid to make ablution or dry ablution before cleaning oneself. So you don't make wudu while you still have filth on you. You have to remove filth, then make wudu. We'll go for Salat al-Maghrib, and then we'll continue inshallah right after. Jazakumullah khair. Can you make adhan for us? Oh yes, you're doing salah. Can someone else make adhan for us? Make adhan for us, Hajj? So go maybe for another 15 or 20 minutes or so, and then I'll let you yeah. 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 Of what? Sorry, use of what? Yeah. Yeah, no, they don't. Where did it? Where did it? Because adham is the bones of animals are najis, so you don't use them regardless. Yeah. So when they were talking about that there, they weren't talking about. So when you talk about bone, talk about using bones. You have to talk about bones of animals that were slaughtered appropriately, and they're animals that are edible. So that may work for cows or sheep that were slaughtered appropriately, and then maybe using china made out of that bone is acceptable. But for animals that are not edible and not slaughtered, for sure, no. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's not much difference of opinion on that one for this. Yeah. Let's see if we can get maybe a little bit further in this. So we'll talk about the toothstick or miswak and recommended actions of ablution. So تسوك بعود لين منقن غير مضر لا يتفتت إلا بإصبعه وخرقة مسنون كل وقت لغير الصائم بعد الزوال متأكد عند صلاة وانتباه وتغير فم. So brushing the teeth with a soft twig or miswak that cleanses the mouth, does not damage it, does not splinter inside the mouth, is recommended at all times except for after the sun has reached its zenith for someone who is fasting, which is after noon, right? So using the miswak by one who's fasting after noon is unrecommended for the Shafi'is and Hanbalis, with other opinions within each school. So each school also has the opposite opinion within the school, like within the Hanbali madhab and the Shafi'i, they have the other opinion. And the Hanafis and Malikis see it to be recommended for the one who is fasting all day long without that exception, which is after noon. But the Hanbalis and Shafi'is do have that prominent position that after noon on a fasting day you shouldn't use it, but the rest don't agree with that. So the majority opinion is that it's fine to use it even after noon when you're fasting. But I thought I'd point that out for you. This recommended act is not achieved by using the finger or a cloth. So it has to be using miswak or something that is equivalent to it, which is a toothbrush today with toothpaste. It's equivalent to using miswak. You can't use your finger or something else. If you want the ajr, you should use something that is appropriate. Its usage is emphasized for prayer, when walking, or when waking up, and when the mouth changes due to food or anything else, and when making ablution or reciting the Quran. And when entering the house and mosque after long silences, within the stomach empty, and for yellow teeth. So he basically just counted all the reasons of why you would have horrible breath and to use miswak when you know that you're going to have horrible breath. So that's to make this simple. A lot of fiqh is scholars knowing the reasoning behind things and then giving you several different scenarios where that would be applicable. Sometimes those scenarios change from time to as time progresses. So maybe 400 years ago, the scenarios that he's thinking about aren't exactly the same scenarios. For this, it's the same stuff. Like when you wake up, when your stomach's empty, when you haven't spoken for a long time, good time to maybe use miswak. When you're going to read the Quran, you're going to enter the masjid, you're going to you do something that with people, then you should probably entering the house because ideally you're going to be speaking to your spouse, kissing your children. You want your breath not to be causing a public health emergency. So ويستاك عرضا مبتدئا بجانب فمه الأيمن ويدهن غبا ويكتحل وترا. So it's recommended to brush from side to side, starting from the right side of the mouth, to anoint oneself with from the right side of the mouth to the left side of the mouth. So that's the recommended. What's also recommended ويدهن غبا, to anoint oneself with oil every other day, to apply kuhl ithmid on each eye an odd number of times nightly before going to bed. So these are habits that the fuqaha would talk about. They still talk about today. Some of them, they see them as sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ did. Some of them aren't necessarily seen as sunnah, but rather as habits the Prophet ﷺ had based on the cultural aspect and the norms of his time. Whether it's yaddahinu ghibba, which is basically applying, using oils because they had scaly hands and feet, using it every couple of days to keep that soft, and to use kuhl. Al-kuhl, they would put ithmid or what they call here. I'm not sure if they gave it a name. He didn't give it a name. Basically, it's a type of, it's almost like mascara, but it's from a natural substance. They put it under their eyes, and men did this all the time, by the way. So if you were to go back to the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you see men with black linings under their eyes. They would do it multiple times a day. It's healthy, apparently, for the eyes. I don't know if there has any actual medical reasoning behind it. I never looked into it, but it could be. But the Prophet ﷺ did it. It was the norms of his time. And it finds its way in most books of fiqh as well. But it's not something that you necessarily need to. وَيَجِبُ التَّسْمِيَةُ فِي الْوُضُوءِ مَعَ الذِّكْرِ. It's obligatory to say Bismillah during ablution if one remembers to do so. So basmala before wudu is just something really, because he uses this terminology that I think is misleading. So I want to point out that only the Hanbalis and some of the Malikis see it to be obligatory to say Bismillah before wudu, only them. So without saying it, there's question of the validity of the ablution. Because he used the word wayajib, I think when he's using the word wayajib, what he means is that it's really highly recommended. Like he's trying to put it on a level where it's not necessarily if you don't do it, your wudu is invalid, but it's not just a recommended sunnah, it's something in between. So sometimes scholars will use that. The Hanbalis don't have that breakdown in their madhab. The Hanafis do. The Hanafis will say fard and wajib as two different things, and they have that breakdown, so it's easier to us to understand the terminology. The Hanbalis don't have that in their madhab, at least not for the most part. They sometimes use it in salah, but not for the most part do they use this breakdown. So sometimes it can be a little bit misleading. Now the way that he kind of gave us the hint that it's not necessarily wajib is he used if one remembers to do so. If one remembers to do so. So he kind of used, but I just point out this opinion because it exists in other books as well. The majority of them that I just see it to be a sunnah. And I say just see it to be a sunnah. I'm interested in the validity of your actions. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. I'm just interested in the validity because I don't want you to do something and then your salah is not accepted because you missed something important. So when I say it's just a sunnah, I mean that if you don't do it, your wudu is valid, meaning your prayer is valid. But should you leave it? No, you shouldn't leave it. Should you ignore it? No, you should ignore it. Should you try and do it every time? For sure, you should try and do it every time. That is for sure the case here. But I'm just talking about validity because that's the job of fiqh in general. Yeah. Yeah, you should do it then even then. Even there, yeah. So the lavatory, because we have them all together now, it's when you're relieving yourself that you shouldn't be making tasbih and dhikr and stuff like that. But once you're done relieving yourself and you put down the bathroom, then you make wudu, then you're allowed to use the dhikr and say bismillah. That's fine. Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. So ويجب الختان ما لم يخف على نفسه ويكره القزع. Circumcision is obligatory when one becomes religiously responsible, provided one does not fear for one's safety, whether male, hermaphrodite, or female. A male circumcision consists of removing the foreskin. A female consists of removing a part of the skin covering the clitoris. It is recommended not to remove all of it. It is offensive to shave part of the head and leave part of it. So I'll explain these things as they're important. Circumcision, I think I made a slide for circumcision. Did I? Yes, I did. Okay, it is obligatory for the Shafi'is and Hanbalis, highly recommended for the Malikis and Sunnah for the Hanafis. So circumcision is an important part of the deen. It's the Sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The Hanafis and the Shafi'is see it to be wajib. It has to happen. If someone converts, then they have to do it unless they have a medical condition where they put themselves at risk for maybe harming themselves. In that case, they don't have to do it. Or they're in a position where they don't have access to healthcare and it's going to be dangerous, then they don't have to. But if they don't have any of these problems, then it's wajib for those two madhab. The Malikis see it to be somewhere between fard and sunnah, so they see it to be a wajib, something very highly recommended. And the Hanafis see it to be a sunnah. But all the madhab point out that if a group of people were to decide that this is not something they're going to do anymore, that the Muslim imam has to push this, like has to fight them for it. No, this is a sunnah of Islam. You have to do it. Like if you're not doing it, there should be reasons for why you would not do it, and there has to be a very clear one because it's a sunnah, the fitrah, it's sunnah of the fitrah. So it's something that Ibrahim alayhi salam did as a part of being Muslim for sure. But people who convert, this is more for people who convert, who didn't have circumcision done for them when they were younger. And there are a lot of details around circumcision that I'm not going to share with you because they're not necessarily. If you have a child, you'll ask about them and you'll find them out. It's recommended for women amongst most, but most. I have to fix the typos. Scholars of jurisprudence, but not to the degree as it is for men, and it can be left to people's customs and medicine. So when it comes, so the khitan for men and khitan for women are not equal by any means in terms of the hukum. Not by any means are they equal. For men, it is wajib. For women, it's different. It's always 1 degree less within each madhab, and it's based on if it's done for men, then it should be done for women as well. But it can be left for people's custom. It can be left to medicine. It can be left for that because there's lack of concrete evidence of it being that. But for men, it is extremely clear. For women, it's not as clear, just as an FYI in general. And when we talk about qaza', so qaza', interestingly enough, qaza' is when you shave a part of your head and you leave another part untouched. That is qaza'. When you fade things, it's not qaza' anymore. Like when you're fading it, it's not qaza' because you're not shaving. So qaza' is very specific. It's for children, first of all. It's not for specifically. It's not even necessarily for men. Meaning there's difference of opinion on whether it applies to men altogether. But it's because the Prophet ﷺ's wording was for children, and it's when they just shave a part of the head, completely shave it off, and don't touch the other part at all. That's the Prophet ﷺ. Don't do that. First of all, it's ugly. And second, it's really ugly. And the second is that it's not, it's not respectful. They would do this because it made them look like freaks. It make children look freakish, and the point of that is to make them less attractive to be taken by raids or by pedophiles, and to make them look scary so they would grow up tougher. It was the idea behind this stuff. So it's not something recommended Islamically do. But people go to a barber and they fade things out and make that. This is not actually qaza, and a lot of people say that's qaza because it's not very long here and it's longer here. No, the guy faded things out and he cut everywhere. Like he took the scissors and he cut everywhere around the head. So he didn't leave one part unshaved and he shaved the other one completely off. That's not the, and qaza is that clear definition. So I think we've called things that aren't qaza and made the lives of younger people much more difficult unnecessarily, because it's not really the definition of it in the books of fiqh at all. The definition is very clear in terms of what it is, and there are evidence, meaning if you go back to some tribes in South America and Africa, you'll see the actual practice where they shave just parts of the head and leave the other parts. And I think, and I'm giving you the reasoning from the reasoning of those places. I don't know if the reasoning I'm offering was actually exactly why they did it back at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but I'm basically drawing analogies from other groups of people who did this. ومن سنن الوضوء السواك وغسل الكفين ثلاثا وتجب من نوم ليل ناقض لوضوء والبداءة بمضمضة ثم استنشاق والمبالغة فيهما لغير صائم وتخليل اللحية الكثيفة والأصابع والتيامن وأخذ ماء جديد للأذنين والغسل الثانية والثالثة. So I'll go through this maybe, and this, and then we'll move on. I'm trying to try and finish Tahara in 3 lessons. I don't know if I'm going to get it done. Hopefully next time we're able to finish the Bab of Tahara, if possible, because it's nice to try to keep 3 lessons for Tahara, 4 for Salah, 2 for Zakah, 1 for Sawm, and 3 for Hajj. That's my breakdown based on the amount of time. So hopefully we can get that done within 13 lessons, inshallah ta'ala. I don't know. So what are the recommended acts of ablution? What are the sunan? What is it that if you don't do, it does not ruin your wudu? If you do it, you get more ajr, but if you don't do it, your wudu is valid. That's what a sunnah is, right? And he starts with sunnah instead of furud. Allah yarham Abu Shuja'. He was very methodological. The other madhahib, you'll find them very different in how they break things down. They're much more complicated. For some, I don't know why he started with sunnah. So the recommended actions of ablution, using toothstick, a miswak, washing the hands 3 times. But it's obligatory to wash the hands 3 times, accompanied by the intention and saying Bismillah, after arising from nocturnal sleep, which invalidates ablution. Though the obligation of washing them and of saying Bismillah are dropped out of forgetfulness. So again, what I talked about in terms of saying Bismillah, the being wajib, he kind of breaks it down. The translator breaks it down here, that if you forget it, it's gone. So it's not really wajib, it's something a little bit less than that, but it's a highly recommended thing to do, which is saying Bismillah. Beginning by rinsing the mouth, then rinsing the nose, and to do these too vigorously unless one is fasting. So you're recommended to do a lot of madmada and istinshaq unless you are fasting.
If you're making wudu, what counts as 3 times, like washing your hands? Like, do you have to
You take water once, take water twice, take water 3 times. Yeah. And we're going to break down this a little bit more, so you'll get a better answer in a moment. Combing one's fingers through one's beard and between one's fingers. So if you have a beard, you have to make sure the beard, and then you have to go through the fingers, and even in the little places, the barajim that exist here, especially if you're a bit fattish. You want to make sure that, because you can fill up with gunk. Beginning with the right side, taking new water for the ears, meaning when you're doing your face or you did your head, the ears, take new water for it. Don't just use the water that was used for the head. That's the sunnah. If you don't, you're fine, but that's the sunnah, to go take a little bit more water for the ears. And performing a second and third washing of each body part. So doing everything 3 except for the head, you just do once. Okay. Which is not very different than the Shafi'i madhab. Maybe you're welcome, if you want to, if you study both, to go back and kind of do a little bit of a comparison and see maybe what's here and it's not there for your own amusement. I'm not going to point them out for you. Once we do a third or a secondary or tertiary level fiqh, we'll start pointing. We're going to run fiqh muqaran lessons once, and it'll only be for people who did usul fiqh and took at least 1 madhab or 2. And then they can attend fiqh muqarana. We'll start, where Shaykh al-Janabi and I are going to play a little game, where we're going to take opposite sides and argue our points, so you understand how the arguments actually work. Not because we believe necessarily in the argument, just so they understand how arguments actually happen. But this, you have to take at least the usul fiqh course that I offered, mine or Shaykh al-Janabi's, and you have to take one of the fiqh first levels. And if you take a second one, that's probably recommended, so that you have a little bit of a background from different madhahib. So furud al-wudu wa sifatuhu. فروضه 6: غسل الوجه والفم والأنف منه، وغسل اليدين، ومسح الرأس ومنه الأذنان، وغسل الرجلين، والترتيب والموالاة، وهي ألا يؤخر غسل عضو حتى ينشف الذي قبله. So the obligatory actions of ablution, these are something you have to do. If you don't do them, then your ablution is not valid. You have to do it again, or you have to do it appropriately. So washing the face, including the mouth and the nose, washing the forearms, wiping all of the head, including the ears. That's different. If you studied Fiqh Shafi'i مسح بعض الرأس, just a small portion, but the Hanbalis are more the entirety of the head or the majority of it. Washing the feet, maintaining the above order, so doing this in order, and maintaining continuity, meaning each limb must be washed before the one before it dries off. So you're doing wudu, you take a phone call. If the phone call is like 10 minutes and by the time you're done, there's no water on your body anymore, you can't continue, you have to go back and start again. But if it's like a couple of seconds or a minute where you're still moist, then that's fine. But So you dry during your wudu? You shouldn't dry during your wudu. Yeah, why? Why? I think if it's because this piece here, anyways, which is al-muwala, is just for the not everyone agrees that the muwala to be obligatory, anyways. But I think if there's a reason for it, so if there's a hazard, then that should be fine. Wallahu alam. But it's best that you don't, that you kind of nashif at the end, like you dry yourself off once you're done. I make wudu at work all the time, and I've never do that. Like I've never found that. Maybe you're using too much water. Don't use too much water, which is what we're going to talk about in a second. Like wudu, you should use less amounts of water. The water should be actually very, very small amount of water that you're using for wudu, and even a smaller amount for the amount of use for ghusl and for wudu, but that's recommended is we're using maybe 6 times more at least for both. So for wudu, you don't want to use a lot of water, so you shouldn't be dripping. Like you shouldn't necessarily, when you're done your wudu, you should not be dripping water all over the place. Now it should be just that there's moisture all over your body, you cleanse yourself. And I think it's best if you don't wipe them off. Even though it's not, the muwala is obligatory for the Hanabila, but not for everyone else, but just to stay safe when you're making wudu, yeah. Again, with a difference of opinion, but for the Hanbalis it is. Yeah, for the Hanbalis it is. So, وَالنِّيَّةُ شَرْطٌ لِطَهَارَةِ. Right, so give me a second and always things will work out perfectly. وَالنِّيَّةُ شَرْطٌ لِطَهَارَةِ الْأَحْدَاثِ كُلِّهَا. فينوي رفع الحدث أو الطهارة لما لا يباح إلا بها، فإن نوى ما تسن له الطهارة كقراءة أو تجديدا مسنونا ناسيا حدثه ارتفع، وإن نوى غسلا مسنونا آخر عن واجب، وكذا عكسه، وإن اجتمعت أحداث توجب وضوءا أو غسلا فنوى بطهارته أحدها ارتفع سائرها. So this is just a couple of scenarios that he gives, but they're pretty simple once you understand what he's saying here. So the intention is a condition for every act of purification. For the Hanabila and for the Shafi'i as well, it's a condition. It's not really a fard. It's a little bit different. You don't have without the intention, nothing works out. You can't go. So a fard, and sometimes you can go back and do it again. Sometimes in certain situations you can go back. It's a wajib. Sometimes you can go back and do it again. But a shart, no. If you didn't do it at the beginning, then nothing counts. You have to go and repeat the whole thing. So that's why it changes things a little bit. You study usul fiqh with me, you know that the shart, if it exists, then the action can exist. If it doesn't exist, if it doesn't exist, the action cannot exist. If it exists, the action may or may not exist. Right? So understanding like that's what a shart is. You require it in order for things to work. One makes the intention to lift the state of ritual impurity or for purification to perform that which would be unlawful without to prayer, circumambulating around the Kaaba and touching the written Quran. So you have to make an intention to lift the state of impurity or to perform an action that you cannot perform unless you had purity. So you're saying I'm a muhdith, I'm in a state of ritual impurity, I want to remove that, or I want to make salah, or I want to make tawaf. That all those intentions count, they're fine. If one intends to perform an act for which ritual impurity is recommended, such as reading the Quran, or the recommended renewal of ablution, such as after having prayed with prior ablution while being forgetful of having invalidated, then the ritual impurity is lifted. So, if you forgot that you lost your wudu, and in your mind, like, I'm going to repeat my wudu just as a sunnah, does it count? It's like you lost your wudu, but you forgot you did. And you're like, I'm going to make an extra wudu. Does it remove the hadath? So the Hanbalis it does. And then if you go down the other madhab, you find a whole array of opinions. because they're much more specific on intentions. Like you have to know what you're doing. So, but the Hanbalis don't mind. Okay, but in terms of removing a ritual impurity, if you forgot and you intended, I'm going to make wudu for reciting the Quran, but you didn't have wudu to pray to begin with, can you pray with that wudu? Yes, for the Hanbalis it's fine. It doesn't matter why you did the wudu. Even if you did it with the intention of a sunnah, like you're trying to do something that was recommended, then it still accounts for salah and anything else that's obligatory.
Do you have to make the intention? I'm going to pray Isha?
No, no. Any act. No, it doesn't have to be specific. No, not at all. If someone intends a recommended purificatory ghusl, such as for Friday prayer, it will suffice for the obligatory purificatory bath and vice versa. So, for example, if you have a major ritual impurity, you wake up and you have a major ritual impurity, and you go in to have a ghusl, but your intention is doing the ghusl of Friday, does it get rid of the major ritual impurity? For the Hanbalis, it does. Not for everyone, it does, though. So you have to make the right intention. Be careful with this a little bit. If one has multiple reasons for one's ritual impurity that render ablution or the ghusl, the purificatory bath, obligatory, but one intends purification from one of them and not raising any other, all the others are lifted. So if you have like multiple reasons or multiple issues of impurity, you don't have to make an intention to remove all of them. If you make an intention to remove one of them and the rest are just removed by default, then that's fine. So the bottom line of this whole slide is that the Hanbalis are much more liberal and open when it comes to having intentions of lifting ritual impurities. It doesn't have to be exactly correct, as long as you know what you're doing a ghusl or you're doing wudu. Even if the intention is not exactly what it should be because of the state that you're in, it doesn't matter, it all counts. And that's just a taysir that they have in their madhab. It just makes it a little bit easier. ويجب الاتيان بها عند أول واجبات الطهارة وهو التسمية. تسن عند أول مسنوناتها إن وجد قبل واجب واستصحاب ذكرها في جميعها ويجب استصحاب حكمها. So it's obligatory to make the intention with the first obligatory act, which is saying Bismillah. So as you say Bismillah, you should have the intention ready. It shouldn't happen after, it should happen with it or before it, right? It's recommended to make one's intention with the first of the recommended acts that precede the first obligatory act. So if there's something that you do before Basmala, that is sunnah, if you do something that you do before Basmala, that is sunnah, you should have the intention with that as well. It's recommended. If you don't, it's fine. You have to have it with the first obligatory act. And that's why the Hanbali said Bismillah was obligatory, because they want the intention to happen with that. That was, Wallahu alam, the reason that he used this terminology. But it's better to have it with whatever you start. Whatever the first act of wudu is, whether it's recommended or fard, you should have your intention with that first one if possible. But it has to be with the first fard. It has to be with the first obligatory action for sure. If it's not, then you have to go back again. It is recommended to remember one's intention throughout the entire process. It is obligatory to positively maintain the intention by not intending its interruption before completing the act of ritual purification. This is more philosophical than anything. It's just you shouldn't intend to stop it before it's done, if that makes sense to you. I don't know if there's a good example of that, but you shouldn't intend to stop something before you're actually done doing it. You have to continue to carry the intention of doing it until the end of it. It sounds philosophical. There are applications of it that you'll find in usul al-fiqh, not really here, so I'm not going to waste your time with it, but it's just something to kind of remember. All right, it's 9:24, and I am getting paged. This is the fourth time I'm being paged. So I'm gonna end with this. We'll continue, inshallah, from Sifat al-Wudu. We'll continue from this next time, inshallah, and try to finish the chapter of Tahara. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.